Welcome back, 1100. I hope you guys had a new week. It's hard to believe, but next week will be midterms, so you guys are halfway there. Keep up the good work. This week we are going to be continuing in Module 3, and this will be Part 4, and we're going to be talking about symbols. And each week we're going to be looking at more and more plans. So this week that we're wrapping up, we were just looking at title blocks, and you guys got to see some title blocks that are actually used at firms. And then this week we're going to start looking at more plan sets to get more comfortable with the symbols that you guys see. So before I get started on my lecture, what I wanted to do was show you some drawings of a remodel that's being done in the technology building where most of the architecture classrooms are. So if you guys are on campus, some of these spaces will look familiar to you. I'm going to skip down to the second page, and on the second page, I'm going to zoom in a little bit, we will see this firm's drawing symbol legend. So I just wanted to make a quick note of this. I'm kind of skipping ahead a week. What we're going to be doing this week is taking a look at what the standards look like. And when I say standards, I mean the National CAD standards. And then next week, we will spend some time looking through actual plan sets and kind of comparing and contrasting what firms actually do versus what the architectural standards are. So one thing that I'll point out, like let's look at this detail reference. We'll come back to this a little bit later so we can compare what this detail reference looks like versus the National CAD standard reference. And I think the north arrow is one of the first ones. So this is a good one too. We'll kind of compare those two things. And we'll take a look at this set over and over again throughout the semester, including some of the other ones that I introduced to you guys last week. So let's go ahead and start off on our symbols lecture. So to start off, I just wanted to let you guys know that I'm going to post this PDF, so if at any time you want to come back and read through it, you can, just as a reference. Your assignment will be based on this lecture / handout, and there will also be some quizzes, including your midterm, that will also refer back to this. So just really quickly, I wanted to point out that when we're talking about symbols, they fall under 5 specific categories: identity, line, material, object, and reference. We'll talk about each one of those. So let's start off talking about identity. Now, identity, according to National CAD standards, it's defined as symbols that indicate individual objects and are generally used in mechanical and electrical drawings. Such symbols are valves, fire alarms, light fixtures, and electrical outlets. These symbols may either be scale dependent or independent. What that means in more plain English terms is that when you look at these identity symbols, I think that they're pretty graphic symbols. So, for instance, this is meant to look like a light fixture. This is meant to look like a light switch. So it's a graphic indication of the thing or the item that it's trying to represent. So this is a thermostat right here, and this is an HVAC. And what it means by scale dependent or independent, it means that as you go through the set, these symbols might get bigger or smaller depending on the scale. So if you have a 1/4 inch plan, these might get bigger compared to like an 1/8 inch plan, or if they are independent, they will stay the same size no matter what scale you're looking at in the set. Okay, moving on from there, we've also got the category of different lines. In sets, you will see that the most common line is the continuous line, and that comes in different line weights. But you'll also see that there are many different line categories. So line symbols indicate continuous objects and are either single or double lines. Walls are usually drawn with 2 lines, and ducts may be drawn with 1 or 2 lines based on the scale of the drawing. Let me pause there. So walls, when you're drawing them in AutoCAD or hand drafting, we draw them using 2 lines or an offset. For those of you who are taking a Revit class, you know that when you draw a wall, it just draws the entire wall segment for you. So you don't even have to think about the 1 or 2 segment part. Now when we talk about ducts, when it says that it may be drawn with 1 or 2 lines based on the scale of the drawing, there are plan sets that are referred to as single line diagrams, which means that even though the object might have like a width to it, it'll just be indicated with 1 line or a single line diagram. Site and building utilities are drawn with 1 line with breaks in the line for a letter to identify the utility line. So let me jump down here. So here's a cable television line. So there's a line, here's a break, and it's showing cable TV. And then the line keeps going. So the break just means that there's an opening so we can have the letters. Same with telephone, gas line, and then we'll talk about contract limit line in just a moment. Some lines are solid, some are dashed, and some are a combination of both. These symbols are scale independent. So this is a good example of a solid dot and then solid. Actually, this would be a dash dot, and it would go on. And this typically shows the contract limit line, which a lot of times is also our property line as well. So not all lines are solid, and there's different lines that indicate different disciplines within the project team. And again, these symbols are scale independent. That means that no matter what scale the drawing is, so whether it's 1/4 inch or if you're looking at an engineering 1 to 100, these would all look the same, just like this. The next category that we have that I'm just showing you a small sample of is material. So material symbols graphically indicate certain materials and are used to help the reader differentiate from material to another. These symbols may be in elevation, vertical, or horizontal section. These symbols should be used as necessary, but not overdone and used where a material begins and ends or changes direction. Such symbols are used to designate earth, concrete, stone, steel, wood, and insulation. Symbols are drawn in an appropriate size and scale of the drawn object. A material symbol may change based on the scale or the view presented of the object. These symbols can either be scale dependent or independent. So I apologize for just reading a PowerPoint to you, but I really think that this just kind of gets to the heart of what they're trying to say. So this right here shows different materials that can be shown on a plan. I'm going to skip back here. If you are, again, familiar with hand drafting or AutoCAD, you know that we have different what's called hatches in the plan. And so here, oh, I'm so sorry. You can see that this particular firm has different ways of showing their material types. So we've got cast in place concrete, steel studs, typically anything that's metal has this kind of double dashed line. Their concrete masonry unit. A continuous material is almost always shown as an X if it's being cut through. Non-continuous is the single line. And this is really common for gypboard. So I'm going to hop back over here. So if we look, here's that lightweight concrete. I will forever destroy this for you and say that whenever I see this, I think of like a 90s Doritos commercial. So Doritos and Doritos dust all over the place. CMU, again, is typically shown with this square material. Let me compare it to the firm again. Where is their CMU? So they just have a single dashed line. So we can already see one deviation from the National CAD standard. And then insulation, this is really common. Let's see if they show their insulation. Yep, here's the common insulation here as well. In rigid insulation, this is also common. This would also be a CAD standard. So this is batt insulation versus rigid insulation. So there's a couple examples of different materials for you as well. And then we've got objects. Object symbols resemble the actual objects being symbolized. Such symbols are doors, some with the direction of swing indicated, windows, toilet fixtures, and furniture. These symbols are scale dependent. So that means that if you show a door, the door should be the actual scale that's on the plan. You don't want a giant door that doesn't fit, or on the contrary, you don't want a tiny door that doesn't fit. So these are scale dependent. They should reflect the size and scale of your plan and drawing. So here's some beams that would be shown in section. Here's another beam that would be shown in plan or section, depending on how it's oriented. We've got our door with its swing. So sometimes this area right here, the swing is not indicated. And then this is a window. It's a casement window, so it's showing how the windows actually swing out. I know it looks a little bit like a door with this right above it, but this is actually a window. And then we've got a really simple range. And a lot of these details really come down to the program that you're using. CAD symbols tend to be a little bit more simple, where Revit will get into more detail. And as we study sets from different firms, different architects, we can start to take a guess as to what program they might be using. Right, our next category is the one that we're going to be focusing on the most for this week, and these are reference symbols. I refer to these a lot as wayfinding. Reference symbols refer the reader to information in another area of the set of drawings, or give basic information regarding the drawing or data on the drawing. Such symbols are exterior and interior elevation indicators, building section indicators. I'm going to stop reading there. Again, we're going to be going through these quite a bit over this next week, and then the following week we're going to take a look at other sets and kind of start marking them up and putting our notes in there. But really, reference is a great way of wayfinding. And one of the most common things that you'll see is a north elevation. So with a north elevation, you typically see these on a plan, and it orients you to how the building is oriented on the site. So you'll see this solid line right here, and that indicates plan north. But then you'll see sometimes another line, and that could be true north. So sometimes your building, if it's kind of skewed off to an odd angle, you'll have project north or plan north, and then you'll have true north. That's why we have these two different options here. And again, this is typically found on any plan views. Now, the other thing that we have is a note, and we have reference notes all over the place. So notes don't necessarily take you or wayfind you to another part of the plan, but it just gives you a good description of the item that it's referring to. And notes can be found throughout the drawing set. They're not limited to a specific section or sheet. Graphic scale indicators, that's another one that is found throughout the entire project set. And really what this does is it's showing you the scale, but in a graphic way. So it's showing you that here is an inch, here's 2 inches, and then it kind of breaks it down for you. So here's 6 inches, and then 3 and 3. And these could be found on any sheet, and it's really kind of a graphic preference of the firm whether or not they want to include these. The default Revit title block or drawing title doesn't include these, so they're not quite as common anymore. Now, this is an elevation indicator, but it's really important to note that this is an interior single view. So you will find these on a plan. And again, next week is the week that we'll hop in and really look at these in action within a plan set. But if you look at the room that you're in right now, it should have, common rooms have at least 4 walls that enclose them, especially if it's just a square. So this interior elevation, this is showing a single view. So right here we've got 1 arrow, but if we wanted to show the whole room, we could have another arrow, and another one. So an interior elevation could have up to 4 indicators, and you can assign them depending on the plan that you're working on. And it is the National CAD standard. Oh, I don't know what happened there, sorry. The National CAD standard is that interior elevations are circular and not square. And just know that some firms kind of break with that standard, but most common interior elevations are circular. Okay. Moving down, we have got more references. So our wayfinding, there are these indicators right here, and they're called a break line symbol. So if there's anything in a plan where you need to just stop that plan and not show the whole thing, you'll include a break line. That could be in a section, it could be in a plan, but this is called a break line symbol. This is a dimension line. So we've got our dimension string, right? So this line right here is typically the line where we would write the dimension on top, and then this guy right here points to where we're starting and stopping. So this is a dimension line. Keynote indicator, usually our keynote will have like a little arrow coming off of it. So this is really similar to what we saw over here where it says note, and we've got the little line. These are kind of in the same family. Typically our keynote will have a line that comes off of it. We've also got a louver indicator or a window indicator. These two are really similar. So the National CAD standard to show windows on a plan are a square turned to its side. And then you find this number on the schedule. And again, we will see that when we look at plan sets that different offices have different symbols for their window and even their door type indicators. We'll take a look at those. Here's our north indicator. We already talked about that a little bit, so I'm going to skip over that. Okay. So we've got details. So in our plan, these are 3 different ways that we can show details. These two are just a repeat of one another. I should take this one out. But essentially, you can do a circle and circle the plan and say, for a more detailed view of this, come look here. So then you've also got a rectangle. And honestly, now with Revit, I keep talking about Revit because that's become the most common tool that we use. And I guess even with CAD, you can do even odd shapes. Like if your room is in a rectangle, if it's got an odd, almost T-shape, you can easily make a T-shape. The big thing to know is that you've got a dashed line going around the area that you want to show in a larger detail. And then you've also got the indicator that tells people where to go to see that detail. And sorry, let me back up a little bit. These are typically found on plans. So you'll see these on plans and it'll take you back to the set. And in fact, let me jump back one page. All of these things that we talked about, these 4, these could be found on just about any sheet. So the break line and the dimension, any sheet. The keynote indicator, any sheet. The window indicator, that typically goes on your plan or elevation. Okay, moving on from there, this is our drawing title, and this just goes into just the tedious information that the National CAD standard goes to say this is the standard. I mean, look, we're getting down to the ½ inch, even millimeters. Again, this is something that we don't necessarily have to worry about that much because most of our programs do these automatically. If you're doing hand drafting, you might consider taking a look at something like this, but the people who make, AutoCAD, Revit, as well as the other drafting programs, they probably started with a National CAD standard like this. So we've got the grid or the module that the drawing is on the sheet. So these drawing titles are typically on your sheet. And within your sheet, you can just say, what module it's on, the actual title. So this might be first level floor plan or east elevations. And then we typically have a scale. So this is an engineering scale. This could also be 1/4 inch equals 1 foot. And then they have also chosen to include a graphic scale. So we're still in wayfinding. So we've got our elevation indicator, and this is typically found on your exterior elevation sheets. So you usually have this elevation mark, and then there's a line that goes across and it tells you what level you're on. So if your main floor plan is at 0 or 100, it will tell you that. You can also find these on the site plan. if your engineer wants to tell you the actual elevation of your site, so if it's like 4,000 feet above sea level, you might see this with a 4,000 next to it. There are times where firms will also put these on the floor plan just so people can easily orient themselves to the height above the site plan without needing to go to an elevation or a site plan. But most commonly, exterior elevation sheets. These are elevation indicators, so exterior elevations. And you can see that they're a little bit different from interior elevations, so they are still circular. But with these, you would only have one arrow because you only show one exterior elevation at a time. And now, most commonly, people are showing these as square. I know it's not the National CAD standard, but just to kind of differentiate between the two, they're showing these as square, and then the interiors down here as circular. So you can see the graphic difference between having one interior elevation versus all four called out. And again, with these are typically found in your plan views, and then it takes you to your other sheets. So here you can see that it's calling out to the 200s for the exterior elevations, and then with the interiors they're also showing it as the enlarged plans, but these are also commonly found on the 400 sheets as well. We've also got our grids, and our grids can really be found throughout the set, but most commonly it is found in your sections and plans. So sorry, I bonked my mouse again. Didn't mean to do that. With the grids, I don't think we've talked about these before, so we're going to focus on them more next week when we start going through plans. But grids line up with major structural or plan elements. So if you have columns spaced every 15 feet in your plan, it's a great place to put a grid indicator. So that way, if somebody is in your project and they don't want to dimension out from like the far north to the far south, they can just jump on a grid line and dimension from there. But again, these are mostly found in plan. We will go over them or take a better look at them in depth next week. And they line up with major structural elements most commonly. This is a revision indicator as well as a revision cloud. So what I wanted to do was just show that if you ever submit a plan to the city or to your contractor and they find some sort of discrepancy or information was left out, what you do to help people understand the information that has been added or changed, you add a revision indicator. So what you would do is you would draw this triangle with a number, and that number typically starts at like number 1. So this is the first revision of the set. And then what you do is you cloud the information that has been added. So for example, if you forgot to add a window detail, you could go back to your details and add it. You cloud around it so that it's obvious that this wasn't here last time, this has been added, and you put this little number 1 triangle next to it. This ties in with what we talked about last week, where we had the revision and changes on our title block. So these two kind of go hand in hand with one another. So on our plans, we will find our room names, and sometimes we will even see people who include room names on sections and interior elevations. So a room should always have the room name, and then typically in a an outlined rectangle, you'll have the room number as well. This is where we probably see the most deviation, where different firms kind of take their creative liberties on what a room label looks like. Wall type indicators. So this is almost like a little section line where we've got a square with a number and then just a little line that cuts through. So never mind these little X, it's really just the square with the number and a line. And what that does is if a contractor has a question about the wall type, they can use this symbol to go to the wall details or the enlarged plans and see how that wall is actually made. So we've got our window identifier here. This is similar to what we had with the louver on the other page. This is just so covered up with all of the drafting standards that I included the louver so it's easier to read. Okay, and those are all of the symbols that we'll be working on. If you are ever on campus and you want to see the entire directory of these, I mean, this document is probably easily at least 100 pages. I just kind of narrowed it down to the common ones. Please let me know and I'll tell you where it's located on our network drive. You can only look at it at school and it's kind of like one person at a time can look at it, but it's just fascinating to me to see how much detail people have put into trying to make all of these different symbols standard. So again, we've got identity, line, material, object, and reference. And really reference and wayfinding is the one that I really want to focus on over these next couple of weeks. So what I'll be asking you to do is there is a worksheet for you guys to go over, and in fact I should have a copy of it here. We've got a worksheet using this lecture and this handout. Please go through and identify the symbols. So tell me what it is, why we use it, where it goes in a set, and where does it take you. Let's do this one together for an example. So what is this? This is our north indicator. We use it to orient the building to the site, and it also shows project north versus true north. And then where does this typically go and where does it lead you to? So this typically goes on plans, so site plans and building plans, and it doesn't necessarily lead you anywhere. So this isn't one that references you somewhere. Let's go down to one that would reference you somewhere. This is a good example of a something that would lead you somewhere. So this is a wall type indicator, and we use it so that we can go through our plan set and see how the wall is actually built and assembled. We can look at those details. And these are typically found in the plans. Sometimes you will find them in the sections, but most commonly it is the plan. And then it leads you to the enlarged plans or details of the walls. That's where it takes you. So make sure to also look at your worksheet from last week so you can see those different sheet numbers. So if you tell me that it's going to take you to, like for example, the elevations, make sure that you tell me that it leads you to the 200 sheets. Okay, so that will be due a week from today. And if you haven't yet, I hope you have, make sure to get Bluebeam because next week will be the first week that we all do an interactive Bluebeam assignment. So make sure you have that ready to go. If you still need a license, please send me a message. If you had installed it without the license, it's probably expired by now, so I can get you the license key. That's it for this week. Please contact me if you guys have any questions, and remember we always have that general questions discussion if anything ever needs to come up there. But I hope you guys have a great week, and again, keep up the good work. We are halfway through. Thanks!